I watched a 3.5-hour Turkish movie on my own, and now I'm going to give you my opinion on it so that I can show you how inflated my ego is. The reason that I'm making a review on Winter Sleep is because, for those that are unaware, this was the winner of the Palme d'Or at this year's Cannes Film Festival, which is arguably the most prestigious award that can be bestowed on a film. For some reason though, this had nowhere near as much publicity as the previous winner, Blue is the Warmest Colour. I make an effort to see the Palme d'Or winner every year now, and I've seen all the recipients from the year 2000 onwards. Although I will say that just because these films win what may be considered the most distinguished honour in all of cinema, they aren't necessarily for everybody. And Winter Sleep is a film that probably my first description of it would be that it isn't for everybody. The film is set in Anatolia, Turkey, in a mountainside hotel run by a retired actor, Aydin. Along with the hotel, Aydin is also the landlord of the surrounding area, whose inhabitants are primarily those struggling with finances. Early on in the film, a young boy shatters a car window, but in doing so shatters so much more. That in essence is the entire plot summary. The rest of the movie follows our characters dealing with their animosities toward one another. Within this universe, it feels as though there was a lot more going on with these people before we as an audience even started watching. All of these characters seem to have been harbouring resentment towards Aydin, and it's once the window is smashed that all of these tensions are released. It's an element of the film that needed to be translated well in order for the plot to make sense, and considering that it communicates this solely through references and very subtle hints, it's successful in doing so. However, if from this point you are expecting a tour de force of drama, then you should reel in your expectations, because the opening 15 minutes is about as exciting as the film gets. But that's not too much of an insult, that's what the director was aiming for. The director, I have no idea how to pronounce this name, so I'm terribly sorry if it's wrong, but this is how I've been told it's pronounced. Nuri Bilge Ceylan has crafted what I would think was the exact film that he wanted to create. This is the first film I've seen of his, yet I've heard that Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is still his best. In terms of craftsmanship, this film is amazing to watch. The look of the film is beautiful, but what I admire even more is that the imagery is contextualised with the psychology of the characters. The natural landscape was almost like a German expressionist film, and I enjoyed how the change in weather signified the change in the film's tone. The snow that arrives transforms their residency from a place of comfort to an inescapable place in which their issues now have to be addressed. Ceylan has approached Winter Sleep in a very unique manner. Most people have said that it has more in common with a novel than with a film. One of the reasons is that the plot unfolds not through set pieces, but through character conversations. Encounters between characters are plentiful and long. There's a conversation between Aydin and his sister Nekla which had to have gone on for around 20 minutes. But it does play out like a real conversation. Much like the rest of the characters that suppress how they feel about each other, this is the same. They gradually work up to what it is that they want to say, and then there's no holding back. It's impressive to keep a scene so drawn out yet remain interesting. However, there was one word I used there which I think is the key description of Winter Sleep. Long. At just under 3.5 hours, it's the longest film to be awarded the Palme d'Or, and there were times when I felt it. For those that don't know me, I move around a lot all the time, regardless of what it is that I'm doing, but thank God that there were only 2 other people in the cinema with me, because I think while I was watching this, I was the first person to complete a marathon through nothing but fidgets. In fairness, the first act and third act don't feel as bad, but this film did not need to be this long to get its point across. A consistent issue that I had with the movie is that it did take too long to say what it wanted to say. It deals with many themes, almost all of which I was very interested in, and I even liked how it dealt with them, but it takes a very long time to get to that point. Then again, like Ceylan says, he enjoys boring cinema. His original draft was supposed to be 4.5 hours long, and according to him, he had more than 200 hours of material. Why? A small pretentious tangent here, but why do we associate slow cinema with realism? For some obscure reason, we feel the need to only define true realist cinema as slow cinema. Like, don't get me wrong, I like slow films and I like realist films, but real life can be interesting, and you shouldn't need to focus on minutiae to be considered realist. There are many films that I consider realist, but many would say that they are too stylized to be categorized as that. The best individual moments of Winter Sleep were its more dramatic moments, in my opinion. But let's move on. The characters of the film were very thought-provoking, and thankfully the length of the film does give time to flesh them all out. In fact, I'll say this. Every character that appears on screen is as well developed as any main character. Quite literally, every person that is in this film is not just a minor character. They feel like a real person that inhabits this world. You could probably have a conversation with someone about all the people in this film, from their motivations to their subtle idiosyncrasies. In particular, I really enjoyed the character of Hamdi, a tenant of Aydin who has far too much pride to let him down with his payments. His character comes across as very well thought out by the filmmakers, as do the rest. It helps that the acting was also pretty fantastic. All of the performances felt very real. The acting for all these characters was invisible. Seriously, for a brief moment I forgot that I was watching a film. Even the child actor is convincing, and that's something that even great directors have a hard time overcoming. The themes of this film are also very deep and complex. It ranges from social inequality to mortality, regret, pretty much everything. If it's a theme, then this film will take a stab at it. The characters are very introspective, and Chalayan wants to show this and have the feeling replicated by the audience. He takes the time to show everything. There are very long, drawn-out shots that linger. It gives the characters and us a moment to reflect. He's clearly a very intelligent filmmaker, but sometimes it feels as though he really wants to show you that he's an incredibly intelligent filmmaker. As I said earlier, this film isn't for everybody, and that's because when I saw the film, I got the impression that it was made for a very specific demographic of people with very highbrow taste. You don't have to understand Voltaire and Chekhov in order to enjoy the film, but I felt as though the film was made for those who do. Certain moments felt as though the film was puffing out its chest just saying, "Look how cultured I am." Characters can sometimes spout out very grandiose statements, which seem to only serve getting the director's feelings of society across, as opposed to further character development. And yet, at the same time, the main character Aydin is a very pompous character, but other characters address this fact. His sister calls him out on it, his wife. It's a part of the film that felt very self-referential to me, but who knows, I may be completely wrong. When the final credits rolled, I left the cinema focusing mainly on how long and drawn out Winter Sleep was. However, as more time passed and I reflected on the film, it grew on me. Day by day, I felt as though I understood more the point of the film. I was definitely bored at moments, I won't sugarcoat it. However, the heart of Winter Sleep are its characters and their emotions, and in that regard it almost ticks every box. Aydin has a fantastic character arc, and there were elements of this film which seemed very realistic. On a technical level, any other complaints I had were very minor. Like when the camera moved sometimes, it seemed as though it was done in post and it stood out, but it only happened a handful of times. Sure, there are very self-aggrandizing parts of this movie, but I think there will be people out there that will really love this. Even now as I think about the film, I appreciate it more, so this rating is not necessarily permanent. It may stay the same, it may not, but if it does change, I could only see it getting higher. Winter Sleep is a 7 out of 10.